I remember my son standing there and he was pretty upset. And he was like, Mom, I just miss you. Like, he was just having like a moment. And I said to him, when we are eating churros in Disneyland, it will all be worth it. Those words haunt me.
Hello and welcome to the Service-Based Business Society podcast. I am your host, Tiffany-Ann Bottcher. If you are ready to scale your success, grow your business, and live that entrepreneurial life, click subscribe because we're about to get started.
Hello and welcome back to another episode. Guys, it is season 4, episode 22, and our 100th episode ever. When I tell you that to me is like a crazy accomplishment, I can't even begin to describe. And interestingly enough, it really comes at an interesting time. It was 4 years ago, end of April, that I left my corporate role. I negotiated a buyout. I was a partner there and started my business. So much has happened since then, including 100 podcast episodes. And I thought today would be the perfect episode to really share the top 5 highs and the top 5 lows. I often talk on the podcast about how business is a bit of a journey, how there's highs and lows and yin and yang and up and down. And that has been my experience. And I think often it's easy to look from the outside and see the highs or be a part of on the inner circle and feel the frustrations or stress or, if you are looking to do amazing things in anything in life, it doesn't have to be business. It doesn't come without struggle. It's not easy. I hate that saying, but if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. It's true. But the fact of the matter is a lot of people are doing it. And that is how I have enjoyed growing a business, because I have had the pleasure and honor of working with incredible business owners all over North America. When I say that I have connected with some incredible people through my businesses, through the podcast, through networking, through events, through, Facebook groups, working on similar projects, I feel so grateful for getting the opportunity to work with some incredible people along the way. The podcast has truly become one of my favorite parts of the journey, and connecting with our listeners, connecting with our guests, sharing different impactful, valuable pieces of information. It warms my heart when someone reaches out after an episode and says, hey, this was fantastic. This is and shares a bit about, how a specific episode maybe just gave them a new outlook on something. Guys, we are not done yet. And I am super excited about some of the guests that we have to finish out season 4. And then we're going to have a little bit of a summer hiatus, as we typically do. And we'll be back in September for season 5. So incredible. The 100th podcast episode is more to me than just an episode. Way back, I've shared I traveled across Canada to attend this very specific business event. And I remember very clearly the person who put on the event talking about having one of the people who was a speaker at the event do some speaking from him early on. And one of the questions at that time, it was Seth Godin, he said, I only go on podcasts once there's 100 episodes. And in my mind, that 100 episodes to me, ever since then, now that was long before I ever had a podcast, long before I ever even thought of having a podcast. 100 episodes to me was like, okay, so you need 100 episodes to feel like you've made it, that you are legit. Well, guys, we're here. We have 100 episode podcast. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in every week. Thank you for sharing about your businesses. Thank you for being a part of this journey. So before we get all sappy and emotional, I really do want to share those top 5 highs, top 5 lows. Not all completely related to the podcast, because mostly the podcast's been on the higher end, but my business journey overall. Because when I tell you that it's crazy that it's only 4 years, it feels like a lifetime. And we're going to get into some of the really kind of cool, surreal pieces that have come to light very recently. So without further ado, in no particular order, we're going to start with one of the highs. Obviously, the 100th podcast episode is high number one. Guys, we're here. 100 episodes. And it's one of the pieces that if I go back to some of the earliest episodes, I think, gosh, I would have done that differently now. And it really is the progress over perfection. Done is better than perfect. Get it out there. Get it going. Because there were people that I still know, that wanted to do a podcast before I started my podcast, and they are still talking about doing a podcast. We're 100 episodes in. We've learned, we've changed, we've evolved, we've done things. The one thing we have never changed since the very beginning is the intro music. I just can't do it. I don't like change. So, but we have changed a few things. At one point, we had a Facebook community, and so earlier episodes referred to that Facebook community. We no longer have that Facebook community. I've talked about my dislike for Facebook communities and managing them on more recent episodes. But if you do want to connect, I would love to hear about how the podcast has maybe changed your mindset on something. Hear about one of your favorite episodes. And also, I would love to hear your questions. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, you can connect with us on Instagram, and you can connect with us on Facebook. Not in a group, just on a page. Send us a message. I'm also all over the internet. You can find me on YouTube, Facebook, etc. And connect with me. Send me a DM. I'd love to hear about how the podcast has affected you in a positive or negative way. Was there something that you passionately disagreed with? I love a healthy debate. So, reach out. Okay. So, we're going to alternate because, we don't want to do all the highs and then all the lows and kind of finish on a negative note. So, the lows. One of the first lows I want to kind of talk about is ultimately the first time in my business journey that our team and I, we made a big mistake. It would be unrealistic to say in 4 years that we've never made a mistake. We have. And I can remember very clearly how that went down. Did we learn? Yes. Did we fix it as best we could? Yes. Do I still remember it like it was yesterday and haunts me a little? I would be a lie if I said maybe. I actually was just talking to my mom about this, where, I feel like we get sometimes these things in our brain, and it's like it just takes up space. Maybe it's not important. Maybe it's something that happened. Maybe it's a conversation you had with someone that later you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Why did I say that? That happened to me recently. Something came flying out in a social setting. Something came flying out of my mouth. And I was like, I really should not have said that. That was not a good thing to say. And I thought about it all day. Should I reach out to the person? Should I say? Maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I shouldn't draw attention to it. I wonder if she noticed. Those are the kinds of things you just gotta get rid of them. Sure, we need to think about what are we doing and use things for growth. But we definitely don't want to be hung up on things. So yes, the mistake happened. One of our employees, one of my team members, missed a deadline, just missed it entirely. And it had a bit of a domino effect that negatively affected a number of people. Did we get it fixed? Yes. Were apologies made? Yes. Have we made that mistake since? No. I don't know when that happened. I can feel, it feels like it was yesterday in some regards, but I can tell you we haven't made that mistake since, and it was at least 3 years ago. So I was on a sales call recently, and a business owner was sharing the sales call. I was the purchaser, and he said, my team will make mistakes, and I apologize for those in advance, but I truly believe it's not just the ability to not make mistakes, but also how to fix them. And I was like, you know what? That's true. Because sometimes you can take a not great situation and turn it into a good situation. So that first miss, I think it really highlighted the importance of what we were doing. In any organization, any of the businesses that I am a part of, when we are a part of a client's business, it is in a key role. We are trusted to do a set amount of duties. Now that could be, and I always say we don't play chicken with the government. Maybe it's a tax remittance. Maybe it is payroll. Maybe it is, paying vendors. whatever that is, a lot of times there's money involved if it's on the bookkeeping side. On the marketing side, perhaps it's, we've got ad campaigns running. Something. It doesn't really matter what it is, but it's important. And so really understanding how much training needs to go into any person that is that in-depth in a business, accountability, and ultimately realizing that as the business owner, as the leader, the buck stops with you. And sure, it was one of my team members who missed the deadline, but it's on me, 100% on me. So we learned it was a low, but there's also many highs. So now diving into our number 2 top 5 highs. Closing my very first client was a high that I cannot forget. Huge part of the journey, because ultimately it all starts with one. Russell Brunson always says, like, you're one funnel away. You're always one client away, one decision away, one something away from progress. And I think that there's something to be said for momentum. There's something to be said for getting the snowball rolling so that it can grow. And, I have been quite vulnerable at times sharing I really didn't know what I was going to sell. And to be honest, I don't sell what I originally was going to sell. Do we have things close to it? Yes. But has the offer changed? Yes. Do I think that what I originally wanted to sell was, looking back on it, was the right thing? I still think there's a spot in the market for that. I just don't think that the way that I wanted to do business fit in that gap. But closing the first client, now you have a business. If you don't have any customers, if you're not generating money, you kind of don't have a business yet. I mean, you might have a startup, but really, closing that first customer really is hey, I'm legit. I have a customer. And that customer, I am so proud to say, is still a customer to this day. Still a great customer. I would consider that customer a friend at this point. First customer was an amazing piece, and we're still working together 4 years later. So definitely a high, and ultimately the very first step in a series of steps to building a business. Well, a business journey would not be a business journey. Any journey really is not a journey without some luck. I often in my life have tried to outwork the problem. And it's interesting because I love tech. I love automation. I know how to scale a business, how to choose things that are scalable, how to build processes and systems. I would consider this some of my greatest skills. But one of my very best skills, and has been for my entire life, is my work ethic. And so when all else fails, the work ethic is what we can lean on. And at times, that serves me well. At times, I have had the ability to push through and get a crazy amount of stuff done. I've shared that, my dissertation, I was in school for a very, very long time. And I chat with the kids about it. My kids are still young. And we chat about university and school and, because they'll be like, oh, we have this many more months of school or this many more years or whatever. I mean, I went to university. I did my full undergraduate degree. I did my MBA. I was in school for a very long time. I did not struggle with anything nearly as much as my dissertation. Kicking it across the finish line was rough. That last little push, the last 10%, if you will, of my educational journey was rough. It was so hard. And I ultimately, at the end, work ethic, got her done. I feel like at one point in my life, I had anxiety about running things. Like I was not a procrastinator. We must get it done early. It was actually the shift into adulthood and high volume that I feel like I almost started to get used to running it up against the line, where last minute didn't bother me as much as it once did. And I remember that shift. And it was in my previous career, we did these proposals and they had to be submitted to this web link. Now these were hundreds of thousands of dollars these proposals contracts were worth, and you had to get all this stuff done and you had to upload it. And so, I mean, you had weeks to do this. There's a group of us that would do it. And the one year, literally, we were like, the timer is counting down and we are like trying to get it uploaded. And we were like people are sweating, sitting at a desk, sweating, pressing. This must upload hundreds of thousands of dollars, like craziness. It was the following 2 years later, same contract renewal. You going in thinking like, hey, I'm going to be more organized this time. And I mean, it was better. We were not like down to the last like 20 seconds, but I didn't feel that same stress and anxiety. And it was really just through the like conditioning ultimately that like last time I was a little bit more okay. The work ethic, the conditioning of like, hey, we'll fit it in. It'll always fit. We'll make it work. It also has the potential for lows. Last year, I took on a project, and I would classify that project as a pretty big low for me. It affected some personal, like more personal business relationships, and it affected my family. We'll touch on that in another kind of piece of the low, but I basically stopped sleeping altogether because I was trying to outwork the problem. And I got to the point, and I don't share this often, but I want to share these lows with truth and honesty. There were many nights where I would sleep on the floor of my office because I knew that I knew that if I went and laid down, I would never get back up, but I only wanted it like a short nap. I remember like a little short nap. And I knew that if I slept on the floor of my office, my body would hurt. We had like wooden floors. I knew that my body would hurt and therefore I would not be able to lay there for very long. So I would have to get up. Guys, when I tell you, I think of those moments now and think, what was I doing? The funny thing is that like, that wasn't that long ago. Feels like a lifetime ago. But I very much was of the thought of, I just have to get a little further. I just have to get this finished. I can do it. No. Inevitably, I ended up very sick, the sickest I've ever been in my entire life. I don't know what death feels like, but I feel like I was pretty close. I was like in the hospital. I like legitimately passed out in the hospital, like onto the floor. My mom had to travel and come and like help take care of my family. My husband was taking care of me, and like all of our life responsibilities. Our life operates off two adults, 100%. And so I was down and out, craziness. If you're sleeping on the floor of your office so that you know it will hurt, so that you know you will have to get up, you've hit a low. You know, they say you have to like get to the bottom of the, before you can go up. I really feel like that was me scraping the bottom. And I feel like, although in that moment, I didn't realize that was the kind of like pivotal, like, okay, we need to make a change here. It was. And so I share that with honesty because I truly think that it's not needed. You can create a sustainable business. You can build and scale and all of these things. My weakness, though, is taking all of the time that I create with automation, with growing a team, and filling it with more stuff. Not bad things, great things, amazing things. Too many things. I have worked really hard since then not to do that again. Do I still have time to take on too many things? Absolutely. 100%. But I always believe that it should be in short spurts. Are we going to go all out? Are we going to do crazy things for a couple weeks at times? Absolutely. I wouldn't feel like me if I didn't. But no more sleeping on the floor. No more counting on discomfort to make sure I get up. And a lot of learning there. All right. Off of the floor and back into Run of the Wind. Crossing the $100,000 mark in sales. It hit home for me because everywhere in the space, and I will say that the marketing has shifted in that length of time, of course. When I started, maybe the algorithm was just doing its thing, but this whole like have a six-figure business, six figures. Now, I came from a life where I made multiple six figures in my previous role. So for me, hitting that first six figures was like a requirement. I've shared before, I had a whole life built on making great money. I had a whole life built upon, that income level. And sure, I negotiated my buyout and started my business and did all of these things. But ultimately, there's only so many ways to cut it. I needed to start my business. I needed to do big things. The first $100,000, I remember, and it wasn't the 100,000, like we were over 100,000. We were like, less than, and it was like, oh, it's coming. And then we were over. There was no fanfare. There was no like, whoa, we made it. But for me, it was just kind of that like, we made it. We're doing it. Back to that snowball reference. The snowball is rolling. We're going. We're doing it. And as a person who like really, the sales like stressed me out so much at the beginning because I was like, I don't know how to do this. None of what I do know how to do, none of what I spent all those years in school learning, none of what I spent over a decade implementing and being my methods, none of that mattered until I could sell it. And to realize that, 100 skills, all completely irrelevant unless I was good at the one skill that I had no idea how to do. Selling $100,000 worth of things, services, whatever, that was kind of like I feel like there was like a badge, whether, in a video game where you're like, ooh, you earned that badge. Ooh, you earned that badge. Maybe Girl Guides where you get the little things. That was like a million years ago. I earned the $100,000 sales badge. Yes. That felt like a big win. We've gone on to sell many more hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of sales. The first one, it just hits differently. I will never forget getting the email that kicked off this low. I had hired a advertising like subcontractor, and we had done all of the steps that we needed to do to be working with them. I was actually super excited to be working. They had a great pitch. Overall, I was really excited about it. And I will never forget getting the email that says, from this person that says that they worked for that organization that I had hired. That organization had not paid them, and I needed to pay them. And it wasn't a super friendly first email. Now, my agreement was with the contractor, not with their team member. And so I said they needed to go back to them, whoever employed them. It got ugly really fast. Turns out it was all kind of a plot. All that they were doing is they were trashing us online as fast as they could. And they were sending emails saying, pay us and we will stop. If you don't pay us, we will damage your online reputation to the point that you will not have a business. Now, I've watched enough U.S. movies saying we do not negotiate with terrorists came to mind. And I get it. It's a little aggressive. But I knew that if I gave them money, they would want more money. Although the first ask was not that much, that if I showed weakness and that I was willing to pay to get out of that spot, that they were not going anywhere. And they trashed us on Google reviews. They went and they wrote messages on any social media post I'd ever commented on, that not even mine. Like if I had written anything on social media, they were screenshots and emojis, and it was crazy. It was a crazy moment because I knew I wasn't going to be willing to pay them, but I also didn't know how long it was going to take them to go away. And so they stuck around for a while. We had other things going on. I remember there was this other kind of big business. We were doing this big offer and whatever. And I thought, I just don't have time to deal with this right now. And I remember telling the team, just shut it all down. Every profile, everything that we had online, make them ghosts. And the team was like, what are you like? But we operate in the online space. Like that's how we do business. And I said, too bad. Can't do it right now. It was literally like getting on a plane to go travel and make this big pitch and offer and whatever. And like, I didn't have the capacity to deal with it in that moment. They came back a couple of times and our profile stayed down for quite a while. When I put them back up, they did come back around. I said no. It kind of went back and forth and whatever else. But in the end, we kept growing. We have a whole podcast episode on exactly what happened, how I got through it. But in that moment of, do I pay them? Will they go away? What do I do here? I feel like Google reviews are like one of the hardest things to get and keep. And it's crazy because we have some 100% legitimate Google reviews that over the years Google has taken down as spam. I'm like, those were not spam. Those were our legitimate customers. These spammy 1-star, like, she's terrible. Their team is terrible. Their organization is terrible. Yeah, like, not customers, nothing. Google didn't deem those ones spam. To this day, we battle our Google reviews. A lot of people put Google reviews up. Google takes them down. Never the spam ones, though. That was a low. Because I felt like my business was built in the online space. And so if you cut that, what was going to happen next? We survived. In that moment, when I was getting those emails, when every post that every person of mine, like every person saw online, and they're posting and they're pictures of me with big red X's and crazy on every post online, in that moment, I was like, is my business over? Like, can we survive this? Yes, we can. We are here. All is well. The anxiety in that moment, though, that was a low. That was a low I don't wish on anyone. And it ultimately, if you have a brick and mortar location and something happens to it, we happen to be in the online space. Online was important. But nonetheless, we're back. Everything is back online. And in the words of Dan Locke, when you have haters, you know you've made it. So it is what it is. All right. One of the wins, at that exact moment, I didn't know was a win. In fact, in that exact moment, I was like a little bit like panicky, embarrassed. Operating a business really is kind of a stage, if you will. And I think that depending on what you do, depending on the type of business you have, obviously there's lots of businesses that happen in the shadows that people don't know about. But I knew that in order for my business to be successful, that I had to be willing to shout from the rooftops and say, like, this is what I do. The decision to be on YouTube, the decision to share those videos places, the decisions to share short form content and other things and business things, and is being very visible. And as a person who's like fairly introverted and likes to be invisible, that was a really big step. And it actually took me a really long time to be willing to share things on LinkedIn. LinkedIn for me always represented kind of my old life. All of my LinkedIn connections when I started my business were all, I had lots of connections, but they were all really from my previous corporate role. They were all people I connected with. They all knew me from there. And so now here I am leaving that space entirely and doing something completely different and being this more outward person, which they didn't know me yet. And so it took a long time for me to be okay. Now we share stuff on LinkedIn all the time. I don't think about it. Now I share stuff on YouTube and podcasts, and I post those to my personal Facebook page sometimes. Not all of them. I have a lot of business connections on social media platforms. And then I have a lot of kids, sport families and parents and aunts, uncles, cousins. And I think, well, I probably bug the business people when I share a bunch of kids stuff. But I'm a proud mom and I like sharing my kids stuff. Take it or leave it. And I probably bother the family a little bit when they're like, oh, another post about business, another post about data. You know what? I'm just here. I'm just me. And I think that now almost 4 years in, it realistically it's taken to be super confident and just rock it. Long time. But the moment that was a win, I'm just going to tie in a little bit to a loss in a moment, but I went to pick my son up. He was playing with his friend, and I went to pick him up, and the mom of the play date says to me, I got the tour. I got the tour of your Instagram, your YouTube, heard all about your business. Your son is very proud of you. And in that moment, I did not hear your son is very proud of you. I heard, my gosh, I'm exposed. The internal panic. I was like, oh, that's, well, yeah. She's like, oh no, he's going to make a great salesperson on your team. He told me all about it. She says, I'm not really looking for any of these services, but if I was, he sold me. We got to see some YouTube. We got the, and in that moment, I was like, oh my goodness. It wasn't until a little bit later that I was like, hold on, the high. He is so proud of me. He knows what I'm doing. He understands the vision. He understands and he's sharing and he wasn't thinking like how cringe my mom's on YouTube. I'm sure he'll get there. But he was just proud. And I think that the kids, because I operate my businesses I operate my businesses and I'm a mom. And so at times, does that mean that I'm on my phone while I'm waiting for them at the sports field? Yes. Does that mean that I'm sometimes when they get in the car, I'm from school pickup and I'm still on the phone with someone and they go to open the car door and I kind of like give the like, hey, you have to be quiet when you get in, hand signal. And they get in and they sit down. And then I hang, when I'm done with the call and then we carry on. How was your day? All these things. So that was a big win. I didn't know it was win in that moment. I felt so exposed. But here's the other win. We'll call it, 4.2. I now am okay with being exposed because every time that I share or do, I connect with someone, I have a new client, someone recommends me somewhere else, our business is growing crazy amounts because of exposure. We spend so much money on brand exposure, to run ads, to do campaigns, do all these things. Ultimately, sometimes we just have to show up. And so I guess there's a partial win in there that it took me a while to be completely okay with it. But now I'm here and I'm okay with it. Same kid. One of the lows. The same project that had me sleeping on the floor also had me fairly, I would say probably the most absent from the mom role that I want to have since starting my business. Not because I was trying to shy away from being a mom. I literally was to the point where like there was no more time. I was maxing things out in a way that was just not acceptable. We survived that. But at one point, I remember my son standing there and he was pretty upset. And he was like, Mom, I just miss you. Like, he was just having like a moment. And I said to him, when we are eating churros in Disneyland, it will all be worth it. Those words haunt me because in the end, that I walked away from that project because I was not willing to do that. I was not willing to make those sacrifices. And time, money, whatever, I walked away from it. And those words, when we're eating a churro in Disneyland, it will all be worth it. And realizing that we were not going to be eating churros in Disneyland and that it wasn't worth it. It was different because I had said it to him. It wasn't just like a personal piece. It wasn't like self-leveraging. It was something I shared with him and I used it to kind of justify, they say money doesn't buy happiness. Well, but it does buy trips to Disneyland. And we talked about wanting to go. So ironically, this year we're not going to Disneyland, we're going to Disney World, but we will be having churros. And like that comment, that kind of justification ultimately it's not a proud moment of mine. And so we will have churros. They'll be in Disney World. And in the end, worth it, not worth it. No one really knows. I regret saying it. It is something that haunts me and I would consider it one of the biggest lows. All right. Top 5. Number 5. The highs. The last one. I think that this one, although it has some specifics, I think it shows growth. It shows progression. It shows that the way life works. Interestingly enough, the business that I left, the kind of corporate organization I referred to, where I negotiated my buyout, where I had my own business, where I left, started my own business, they have now hired my business to do some very specific kind of project work and whatnot. And it just really feels full circle. it's very interesting. It's at times kind of a strange dynamic because, I'm working with people that many years ago I interviewed, I hired for specific roles, and they, of course, have all moved up and grown and done great things and, are very talented people and have gone to do amazing things in their careers. But like coming back in and kind of getting it's a little bit nostalgic. It's a little bit, it's just an interesting dynamic. But what I love to see is that all things kind of come around. And there's been multiple situations in my business along the way where there's been some things that have kind of been like an uncomfortable situation. Maybe it was a miscommunication. Maybe it was just someone that there was just like kind of a weird thing with. And at times, I feel comfortable now to kind of navigate those situations, to feel like uncomfortable and to do it anyways. And there's actually been a few situations that I thought were like not good, kind of like, oh boy, and have been salvaged to be completely fine situation. So I think that there's a win there in personal growth. I think that at times our own anxiety and overthinking, I was kind of talking about things sitting in your brain, taking up brain space. Our overthinking often gets in the way of just like, let's move on. Let's just get to it. So it's great to be back in a very different role. Often people are like, oh, are you working here again? Sort of. I don't work. I'm definitely not an employee, but now my team is working with their team. It's very interesting. Some people that I worked very closely with before are now working with people that I work very closely with now. And, growth. I like it. The flip side of kind of growth is, and those situations that I mentioned really takes us to low number 5, misalignment. There's been a few situations that were incredibly misaligned. And I think that as someone who was worried about sales, who wanted to please, who wanted to say yes, who generally wants to make people happy, I don't ever want to disappoint a team member, a customer, family member. Like that's not my nature. I want to make people happy. There's been a few situations along the way that it more so than anything, just misalignment. Perhaps it was someone we worked with who, we were working closely with, and they just had a very different style of the way that they wanted to do the project. Or, there was a couple of people along the way who inquired about working with us. And on the sales call, it was clear it was just not a fit. I handle those situations very differently now. I'm just more upfront about, I just don't think this is, going to work out. Which, kind of ties into that being willing to be visible, being willing to be uncomfortable, willing to have tougher conversations. At one point I wasn't, and I kind of think I kind of danced around things, and being less clear creates more confusion and ultimately then leaves things up for interpretation. There was one particular person who I was on a call with, sales call. They had booked into my calendar. They were a somewhat referral of someone else we worked with. And I got on the call, and this person made some very inappropriate comments that did not align with any kind of values that were okay for me. And it's kind of one of those situations where it's like, okay, but they're obviously like a connection of someone we work very closely with. I didn't want to grenade the situation, but I knew that was just not someone that I wanted to work closely with. That was not someone that I wanted my team to have to work closely with. And so it wasn't a great fit for a number of reasons outside of that. But when I shared with that person that, you know what, we offer this, you're looking for that. We're doing this, you do that. I left the inappropriate comments parts out. That person was very upset. They passionately wanted to work with us. And it turned into a big thing. There was a bunch of Facebook posts and comments and this and that. And it turned into a bit of a thing. And it really just came down to misalignment. And it's really only one example. There's been multiple examples where there's just not all customers or prospective customers, vendors, team members, opportunities, working relationships. There's been lots of things, pieces of technology. It's not just customers, but misalignment can bring lows. And if I think to any situation that I look back on and think, gosh, that was just not, it was not, the vibe was not vibing. They have presented some of the darker moments when I have not handled them appropriately. And I think that it's taken a long time. to feel comfortable and confident in all situations, whether it's uncomfortable, whether it's, delivering not great news, all these things. There's still moments that I think, oh, I really don't want to have to deal with that right now. Absolutely. That's life. So my journey has been filled with all sorts of highs and lows. I share some pretty vulnerable moments here today because I think that sometimes we have to just be honest about some of the things that we've learned, And so someone that I respect very much always says, you either win or you learn. I hate that saying. Every time they say that saying, that's right up there with me with the you get what you get and you don't get upset that they say in like kindergarten, preschool, whatever. Can't stand that one either. There's like these little things, but that one in particular is, I think that you can learn while you win. I think you can learn while you lose. They're not mutually exclusive, but I think that time, you can't learn all those things overnight. And so if you're at a point in your business where you're having a few more lows, that's okay. Keep going. I will share that several of the lows I shared today all happened in a very short period of time, like within a 7 or 8 week period. It was rough. There were others in that 7 or 8 week period. I never thought about quitting them. So keep going. You can do amazing things. If you ever want to have a podcast, one day you can be sitting there saying, this is our 100th episode. Guys, I have so much gratitude, so much appreciation. Like I said, although we don't have a Facebook group anymore, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, shoot me a message. I'd love to hear your comments, have some discussion about any of our episodes, and answer any questions that you may have about business. Maybe we'll share them on a future episode. So thank you. 100 episodes is wild. And guys, for the 100th time, I will say that's all for today.
Don't forget to click subscribe, comment below, and share the episode with a fellow entrepreneur. If you want to take us on the road, we are available everywhere you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much. See you next time.